welcome to the PCM Tech Help Show. I'm your host Craig Chamberlain, and in this video we're going to be doing an even more intimidating thing than we did in the last video. Hopefully I'm stretching your limits here a little bit, and maybe you're just watching for fun knowing I'm never actually going to do that. But in this video we're going to be installing the computer processor fan. Now this is probably the most intimidating part for most people because the fan itself, really you got a one-shot. Now here's the critical part here. If you look down here, this is your heat sink. That'll smudge. Don't touch that with your finger. And it's connected to a copper plate, which is the most conductive, one of the most conductive metals you can get, which is why it's such an effective heat sink. But the liquid there, that's what you'll smudge if you don't do it right. And you have to replace that and start all over again. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to line up these 4 pins here with the 4 holes on the motherboard. So come on in here and take a look at the holes. I don't know if you can see them very well, but that's where they're at. See those? Okay. Now comes the scary part. I mean, the easy part. That's what I meant to say. All you gotta do is make sure that all 4... I haven't pushed it down on the processor yet. I'm just setting it on top of the holes. Make sure that the holes line up. Okay, the holes officially line up. And then push through each side. Don't be afraid to apply a little bit of pressure. Depends on the board. You might have to put your hand underneath it. And then, if I had a screwdriver, which I don't have one on me, you'll actually turn these. There's a little arrow on them to turn direction. You probably can't see it. The arrow you turn into is actually your lock position. And so then you just turn each section, which I'll get my screwdriver later, and then pull up on each side, make sure each side fit in there properly. And my fan will not come out, so I must have done it right.
Water cooling is a great way to keep your computer running ultra cool and ultra quiet. And while it takes a bit of work to set up, it can be much more effective than traditional air cooling with fans. It's great for gamers, overclockers, or anyone else that would like to just keep their computer running silent and cool, not to mention looking awesome. Now it's time to install the water block. Remove your current cooler and wipe off the thermal paste with some isopropyl alcohol and some toilet paper. Then add a new dab of thermal paste, remember less is more, and then set your water block on the CPU. Put the backplate on the back of your motherboard and start screwing it in just like you would any other cooler. Make sure to screw it in a star pattern so you apply pressure evenly to each side of the block. When you're done with that, you can move on to your radiator. I'm mounting my radiator internally at the top of my case, but if you have a smaller case, you may have to do it externally using the included brackets. Screw on your radiator and attach your fans of choice. The last piece of hardware we need to install is our reservoir. We're going to use a reservoir that sits in our external drive bays, so all we need to do is slide it in, plug in the power connector, and we're good to go. Now it's time for the fun stuff, connecting your tubing. First, grab your fittings and screw them into the inlets and outlets of each of your components, the CPU block, the radiator, and the reservoir. Make sure to screw these in tightly so you don't have any leaks. I like to give them an extra twist with a pair of pliers to make sure everything's on snug. Then, get your tubing and connect it to one of your fittings. Measure out how much tubing you'll need to connect it to the next component in the loop, mark it with your finger, and then cut the tubing as straight as you can. Connect that end to your next component in the loop and make sure it fits tightly. If you want a bit of extra security, you can use hose clamps or zip ties to keep them in place. Repeat this process with the other runs in your loop. You may find that some of your runs produce kinks in the tubing, which is bad for your water flow. In that case, you may need to take a step back and replan your loop. The shorter the runs, the better, but you want to make sure everything is kink-free before you continue. Now we're going to fill up our loop with water. If you want, you can disconnect everything from the computer and fill it up outside the case, but we're going to do it inside. As long as you go slowly and make sure everything is secure, you shouldn't ruin any of your components. Just place some paper towels under any fittings, and if you do spring a leak, quickly stop the flow, empty out your loop, and try again after your hardware has had a chance to fully dry, usually after about 24 hours. Now before you fill it up, you'll want to jump your power supply. This lets us test the fans and the pump without actually turning on the full computer. Disconnect your 24-pin power cable from your motherboard and jump the green wire to one of the black wires using a paper clip. Some kits come with a small jumper that also serves this purpose. Next, add your liquid additives to your water, if applicable, and then fill everything up. Stick your funnel in the reservoir's fill port and carefully pour your water in. almost filling it up to the top of the reservoir. Some may empty into the tubing at this point, and that's okay. When your reservoir is filled up, flick the switch on the back of your computer and let the water flow for a second. Once your reservoir gets about halfway down, turn the computer off before the pump runs dry and fill up the reservoir to the top again. Flip the power switch and let the water flow again, repeating this process until your reservoir stays filled up. Double check for any leaks, and if everything's okay, you have yourself a working water loop. The last step is to let the entire loop leak test for about 24 hours. Check back with it frequently to make sure it isn't leaking anywhere, and if you see any bubbles, you can try and get rid of them by power cycling the computer, shaking the case, or by jiggling the tubing itself. After a while, those bubbles should work themselves out though. Again, this is where that drop of dish soap can come in handy and speed along the process. Once the system proves to be leak-free, you can turn it off, reconnect your 24-pin cable, close everything up, and start using your computer. You should find that your temperatures are lower, especially under load, and that your computer is whisper quiet. You'll probably want to empty out the loop and refill it every 6 months or so, as well as clean out your reservoir and radiator to keep them free of any gunk. Other than that, you're ready to overclock your system, do some serious gaming, or whatever else it is you want to do with your new water-cooled computer.
Hey YouTube, Epicnosis here, doing a video that I've been waiting to do for a while. It's going to be on Peltier Tech chips, so I'm going to jump right on into it. Basically, these are coolers which can be used for many different purposes, but the purpose I'm going to use it for is to try to cool down my computer. Basically, the Peltier chip is 2 ceramic plates with metal dots like inside of it, which when voltage is applied to it, one side gets hot, one side gets cold. So I'm gonna demonstrate real quick how that works, but before I do that, I wanted to show you what was in between the two ceramic plates. You see inside of there, I don't know if you guys can see that. See, those are just like little, I guess, metallic squares of some sort. Might be aluminum. I'm not sure what type of material it is, but yeah, the voltage goes across that, and you can see how that is plugged up into it. I fried this one, so that's why I opened it up. So I'm gonna mute this. Let's start it now.